I mean, there's a reason we still have 80-year-old presidents. There's just not enough in Gen X raising their hands or being selected for that matter to grab the baton and do what they need to do.
Do you want a wealthy retirement without worrying about money? Welcome to the Retire in Texas podcast, where you will discover how to enjoy your faith, your family, and your freedom in the state of Texas. And now, here's your host, financial advisor, author, and all-around good Texan, Daryl Lyons.
Hey, this is Daryl Lyons, CEO and co-founder of PAX Financial Group. Thank you for listening to Retire in Texas. Let me give you the legal disclosure that this information is general in nature only. It's not intended to provide specific tax, investment, or legal advice. Visit paxfinancialgroup.com for more information. So I also want to make sure that you go to PAX Financial Group. The ebook that's getting attention now is on pivot retirement planning. And it's a specific construction that I spent quite a bit of time working with my team to develop with the consideration of an area of academic study called behavioral finance. And it lays out a specific retirement strategy that you will find value in the content if you're thinking about retiring in the next 5 years or you've already retired. So check out that ebook. It's online at paxfinancialgroup.com. So 10,000 people turn 65 every single day in the United States. 10,000 people every single day in the United States turn 65. And so what does this look like? How does this affect us? And does this have an economic impact on this experiment called the United States of America? And it certainly does. And it's one, as I'm generally find myself thinking about patterns and trends in the future, this has more of an impact on our country than we think. And I'm going to make sure I outline this in a very concise way, given the fact that it's a robust conversation that is way beyond the scope of this time, but I'm going to do my best to turn it into some meat. But we're going to talk about money and leadership because both of those things are going to be transitioned from one generation to another. And the main two generations I'm going to talk about is the baby boomer generation transferring money to Gen X. Now, baby boomers were born in 1946 through 1964. The Gen X generation is the next generation, 65 to 80. That's actually me. I fall into that Gen X category. The interesting thing about the difference between the two is the size. And this becomes problematic because there's a very large baby boomer, by definition, group of people, but not so much the Gen X. I mean, you could say there's almost a double the number of baby boomers versus Gen X. It's not quite, but it's that significant. So how do you transfer this money and leadership to a smaller group of people effectively? I mean, there's a reason we still have 80-year-old presidents. There's just not enough in Gen X raising their hands or being selected for that matter to grab the baton and do what they need to do what we need to do as a Gen Xers. Gen Xers, they think differently than baby boomers, certainly. So let's talk about some of those differences. We always complain about the next generation. That's just kind of what we do. But Gen Xers are defined by the AIDS epidemic. They're defined by the fall of the Berlin Wall. And many of us, I can attest to this, is defined by that dot-com bubble burst and bubble in and of itself. We've often think about diversity in the workplace. We have this idea of a personal and professional balance. We're really focused on diversity. We tend to not stick with an employer as long as the previous generation. What's interesting is by 2028, the Gen Xers will outnumber the baby boomers. But those are just some of the attributes that define that Gen X. Whereas if you contrast it with the baby boomer generation, those born between 46 and 64, you would make the case that, hey, we were defined by the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, even Watergate. Baby boomers are very focused on loyalty and teamwork, works on efficiencies. You have to pay your dues. The greatest generation ever born, well, I guess that would be the generation right before the World War II, but the impact from that generation is real, the loyalty and the patriotism. So just different approaches to life defined by events. And certainly I'm speaking generally, but there are different approaches to life. So how is this money and leadership going to be transferred to the next generation? I think we need to go through that in the context of four different people, four different characters. And I'll talk about each of these characters in the context that I think it'll make sense. One is there's a group of people that will be the givers. Those will mostly be the baby boomers that transfer the money to the next generation. The second group will be the receivers. This will be a lot of the Gen Xers. The third group will be the opportunist. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means. And then the fourth group will be the relay team. And I'll define that a little bit and be cute with words there, but I want to make sure that I frame this up in such a way that you recognize that there are four groups of people that play a role in this transition of leadership and money. And we have to be intentional. In fact, I heard a story the other day that, and I don't know if this is true or not, that somebody left their house to their cat. So they transitioned their wealth to their cat. And I suppose that could be done. But as I understand in this story, again, I can't validate if it's true or not, but it was a sunny day and the hearse literally ran over the cat. So look, I know people are probably going to text me because I had a cat story that wasn't favorable, but if that story is true, blows your mind that actually could exist. But when you transfer money, you can choose however you want to do it. You can write it up in your will, however you want it to play out. I'm starting to think about the baby boomer transition of money. By the way, you just need to know this. This is the largest transition of wealth in our history of the world. Largest transition of wealth. You can Google this and there's thousands of articles on it. Largest transition of wealth. And we don't think about it that much. Like, how is this going to impact demographic trends that are taking place? And it's certainly going to define us over the next 10 or 15 years. But the greatest massive movement of wealth from one generation to the next is happening. I think we have to start thinking a little bit more intentionally, specifically in the baby boomer generation, who are the majority of our clients that we work with. And I've wrestled and done life with over the years and talked with countless of them. I mean, gosh, I was telling my wife the other day, I've spent so much life with so many people being in this business for 25 years that I've seen people go through so much. And it breaks my heart to know that people pass away that I've walked alongside and helped. But what I have learned is that giving while you're living is more fun. So if you are in this baby boomer generation, giving while you're living is certainly something to consider. Now, every year the IRS gives you a maximum amount that you can give, and you can Google the amount. It changes every single year, but it's per person. So you can give X number of dollars to each of your kids. So can your spouse. You can give then the same X amount to your grandkids and to your daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws. So you can give X amount of dollars before you have to file a Form 709. Once you file that form, it's not as though there's a gift tax necessarily. It's just notifying the IRS that you made that gift. Won't get into the complexities of the estate planning. Maybe we can do that on another podcast. But just know that you can do your giving while you're living, gift tax free if you stay under that number. So why not do it? You can enjoy it. You can watch them. You can walk alongside of them and steward them. I would not hold it against them. Hey, you didn't return my text within 24 hours and I just gave you $10,000. You should return. You don't want to play that game, but I think it'd be a lot more fun if you walked alongside and provided that leadership and guidance and observation. Because if you have other money that you're going to leave down the road that has more zeros on it, you can kind of test the waters and see how that'll impact their lives. I think that we discount inheritances. You've heard me say this before, and I'll say it again. An inheritance is what you leave to someone, but a legacy is what you leave in someone. So if you're going to give while you live, do it with intentionality. Do it with love and patience. Do it in the context of your financial plan. So when you're working with your advisor, have a conversation. And the question to ask is, how much can I reasonably give each year to my kids where it doesn't threaten my personal financial plan? So that's the first group, the givers. The second group are the receivers. These are going to typically be the Gen Xers that are going to receive this money, which is hard to believe. I think it comes out to about $200,000 per person is going to inherit some money. I don't suspect I'll be a recipient of any of that money just based on my family, but many people will. And just be careful if you're a Gen Xer and you're getting this money. If you have drug addictions, if you're a liar, if you are lazy, I've worked with lottery winners before. I can tell you wholeheartedly, money accentuates bad behavior. Money accentuates. In fact, Warren Buffett even says, he goes as far as to say that an inheritance is simply food stamps for the rich. So if you're about to get a ton of money and you are having marital problems and you're sluggard, you know who you are, man, be very careful. This money does not solve those problems. If you're a baby boomer and you're going to give money to your kids, just know that you can treat them equally, but it doesn't mean that you have to give them equal amounts of money. All of that can be outlined in a will. And I do recommend that you have a family conference about this, because the reality is for those that are baby boomers that are going to end up transferring money, you're going to have a conference. There's going to be a family conference. The only question is, will you be there or not? So I want you to be very careful as givers and recipients, for that matter, to think about what impact sudden wealth does to your family. Okay, let's go to the third group. These are the opportunists. Look, if you go down, if you're not from San Antonio, you're listening, there's this corridor between Bernie and New Braunfels, small Texas German towns, and there's a road called 46. It's north of San Antonio. It's a beautiful road. And if you look along the sides of the road, you have ranch lands owned by old German ranchers that have been passed down generations. Those ranches are not high fence, meaning they're not being used to hunt, which is upper Texas. So those ranches are low fence, meaning that these old German ranchers, when they pass away, which is happening right now, the kids that are in Houston and Dallas and LA and Austin and maybe San Antonio, they're not going to want that ranch and split 5 ways. They're going to want the money. And there's realtors that are going to be opportunistic and sell that land to D.R. Horton or KB and to develop it. That is happening. That is going to happen. It's happening. And there's going to be people that take advantage of it and love it or hate it. I mean, we all have our opinions on it, but that's just going to happen. And so I think that if you're looking at this transition of wealth and you're a business person, you've got to get in front of this. Look, if you're in the healthcare industry, if you're in the dementia industry, if you're buying stocks in these companies, this trend is going to make people rich and people are going to be able to accumulate wealth. I mean, if I even think about my own business, 1/3 of all financial advisors are going to retire in the next decade. 1/3 of all financial advisors are going to retire in the next decade. That's an opportunity for me to either buy an advisory company or take on clients that need a different advisor. So if you're retired or if you're a business owner or you're even an investor, please start thinking about this demographic shift and say, what can I do? It's happening. What can I do to take advantage of this opportunity? Because the transition of wealth is going to completely change the game for business. Consumer expectations are already changing. And so you've got to ask yourself, where do I go to reap the rewards of this? Okay, the fourth group of people is the relay team. This is the team from the baby boomers to the Gen X that passes the baton of leadership. This baton of leadership, it has to happen. In fact, if you look at some studies, there's one from Deloitte, and it said that the majority of executives feel that their organizations are unprepared to meet their leadership requirements. Another survey, it's 2021 survey, Global Leadership Forecast, found that only 11% of HR leaders report having a strong bench. We have to, or actually I'm calling on baby boomers right now. Baby boomers, we have to learn leadership from you. You can't take it to your grave. You have to pass the baton to the next generation when it comes to leadership. I'll give you a story real quick. A wise old businessman paused and having a conversation with a young businessman. The young businessman said, "Sir, could you tell me what it takes to become wise like you?" The old businessman said, "Certainly, my son, 2 words." The young man then asked, "Please tell me, sir, what are those 2 words?" The wise old man answered, "Good decisions." The young man thought about this and then boldly inquired, "Sir, can you tell me how you learned to make good decisions?" And after thinking for a moment, the wise old businessman said, "Certainly, my son, 1 word, experience." Persisting, the young man said, "Please, sir, permit me one more question. How do you get experience?" And the wise old businessman said, "Son, 2 words, bad decisions." That story conveys so much truth. And so I beg you, baby boomer friends that are listening, this transition of leadership's happening, and it's time to pass the baton of leadership to that next generation so we can continue to make this country, this great experiment, one of the greatest places to live, to raise a family, and to do great things. So the 4 groups of people in summary: the givers, the baby boomers; the receivers, generally the Gen Xers; the opportunist, the relay team, transitioning leadership by handing the baton to the next generation. Appreciate you guys tuning in today. This is a very heavy subject. Lots of research that you can find online on this subject. And again, we have some ebooks that discuss how to effectively transition money to the next generation. It's called Pivot Retirement Planning ebook at paxfinancialgroup.com under the ebook section. But I want to remind each and every one of you that you think different when you think long-term. Have a great day.